Did you hear that?
I heard that.
What was it?
Could be a lot of things.
Yeah?
A coyote.
There aren't any coyotes in England.
The Hound of the Baskervilles.
Pecos Bill?
Heathcliff.
Heathcliff didn't howl.
No, but he was on the moors.
It's a full moon.
Beware the moon. And stick to the road. Oops.
American college students on a walking tour of Britain are attacked by a werewolf that none of the locals will admit exists. It is the 1981 classic. It is the best horror film of all time. I don't know what Hunter thinks about it. We have not discussed it. I'm curious to see where this goes. It is an American Werewolf in London, directed by John Landis, starring David Naughton, Jenny Agutter, Crush That Crush Button, Griffin Dunn, and John Woodvine. And that's what we're going to be talking tonight on the last Halloween episode of Extras and Epilogues on the Podzilla 1985 network. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the theater. My name is Shannon Young. With me, of course, I have my co-host / other host for the evening, Double H.
I wanted to quote something, but the only thing in my head right now is just ba 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 ding 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 ding.
The one quote,
I can't get rid of it.
The one quote that always stuck with me out of that movie the most, and it's what I have here in the podcast recording. It's the scene where Jack is talking to David. I think it's the second time he talks to him after he's turned into a zombie, and they're in the nurse's house. And David's sitting on the couch. He just looks at him and says, "I do not accept this." Like, it just so defiantly, I do not accept this.
It's very just, yeah.
Yeah. So, to me, this is the ultimate werewolf film. Surprisingly, they don't make a lot of werewolf films, and the amount of good werewolf films I can literally count on one hand. When you talk about vampires in Hollywood, there are so many good vampire films. There are so many good zombie films. I guess the only one that I can think of that's worse is maybe Frankenstein. There's like 2 good Frankenstein films, and the rest are kind of garbage. But
yeah,
to
that's
me,
fair.
werewolves seem like such an easy monster movie to make, and yet here we are talking about an American Werewolf in London, which came out in 1981, a year before I was born, and it came out around the same time, if I remember correctly, as The Howling. I think, let me look that up real quick.
Same year. It is the exact same year.
Yeah.
I can confirm that. And I'm pretty sure The Howling came out before it, actually, because London doesn't come out until August 21st of that year. I think The Howling came out back in the spring or summer. So,
and both are classic werewolf movies. They're probably the 2 best werewolf movies of all time, and they came out in the same year. As crazy that is. Let's run down the stats real quick on this bad boy before we get into the meat and taters of it. 97 minutes of werewolf action and comedy. Budget
again. I got to talk about it because we've mentioned it a couple times now. A sweet spot for movies. Please, for the love of God, start making more movies that are approximately an hour and a half long.
Dude, we watched...
Can we go back to it?
We watched the Tom Savini remake of Night of the Living Dead the other night, and it clocks in at, I believe, 88 minutes. And I'm like, you don't need to...
perfect.
I don't understand the need to stretch things out just to stretch things out. You could tell a good story in an hour and a half, give or take a little bit. That's the sweet spot.
To me, a long movie should be
2 hours.
2 hours or just over.
Yep.
Like, I remember when I was a kid watching, the Star Wars movies they're all 3, the original 3 are like a little over 2 hours, if I remember correctly. One of them is peaking up around 2:30. That's as long as these fucking things should be.
Yeah.
Anything past that, I mean, as much as I have not quite fallen off the Marvel bandwagon the way that a lot of other people have, I too, when I go to see one of those movies, go, oh God, can we cut it down, please?
Okay, so not to get on a tangent, but some of those Marvel films, I can understand why they would be that long. You got a movie like The Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame.
Infinity War game. Right. Yeah, I mean, you've got to have a ton of stuff. They even left stuff cut out that people later went, how did you cut this out?
Right. But then you have a movie like, I don't know. I don't know how long it was, but like Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel probably doesn't need to be 2 hours. A Thor movie does not need to be 2 hours.
The most recent Ant-Man movie, off the top of my head, is the most egregious one. There's no reason that movie should have been like almost 2.5 hours long.
Right.
It's way too much.
Way too much. It's one of the things I hate most about Hollywood right now. And I love, you remember SNL did that skit a couple years ago with Pete
Yes.
Davidson talking about the sweet
Yeah,
spot for
because
horror
it was
films.
the Netflix thing, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
They were like, this, Netflix should have a section of like short horror movies. That's what I want.
And then
that's what I want to watch.
And then Netflix created it in response, as
And
funny
they did
as
it.
that is.
Yeah.
But hey, sweet spot on this movie, and this movie is the sweet spot when it comes to, in my opinion, I know a lot of people say Shaun of the Dead is the best comedy horror film. This is my favorite comedy horror film. Directed by John Landis, as I said before, budget of $6 million versus a $62 million box office. It was a genuine hit. Critical reception is good all over the board for the most part. 89% positive critic reviews, 7.8 out of 10 on Rotten Tomatoes, 55 out of 100 on Metacritic, which surprises me. I didn't know that this movie was so down the middle in some places. I thought this was a pretty universally loved horror film, and this, coming from John Landis, was right before, I think, not too long before his fall from grace after the incident that happened on the set of The Twilight Zone, which, if you've never heard that story, look it up, but don't watch the video. It's a tragic tale.
That if I remember correctly, that happens a little bit later in the 80s, and that's kind of from that point on the beginning of the end for him, if not quite literally the end. I mean, that pretty much puts it to an end. It's hard to act like he's not at some fault for this. Obviously, what happened was an accident, but he also was kind of in charge of that set. Yeah, it was a careless situation. Now, for people to still rail on the guy years and years later after it, I remember distinctly, when Max Landis, his son, was in the midst of kind of dealing with his own PR fallout, him saying, the stuff that people say to me about what happened with my dad, something I wasn't even there for, I had nothing to do with, is vile. And frankly, if you're using it just to get at somebody, that's vile in and of itself. But that's a whole other issue for a whole other thing.
And the crazy thing, what they didn't do? They didn't charge John Landis with murder, like they're doing with Mel Gibson. Not Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
Alec Baldwin.
Alec Baldwin.
Yeah. The only thing you can charge Mel Gibson with is, well, that's an After Dark episode. Can't really talk about that here. Let's talk about American Werewolf in London, because I can't remember the first time I watched this film, but I fell in love with it the moment I watched it. Werewolves have always been my favorite horror monsters, which does make me sad that they don't make very many good werewolf films. But to me, there's two kind of werewolves. There is the werewolf itself, which is more of the beastly monster, and then there's the Wolfman. I almost treat them like two different things, because the Wolfman to me has never been scary and it's never been interesting. I know it is a classic film.
Yeah.
They remade it a couple years ago with Benicio del Toro. I thought it was a decent enough film, and Anthony Hopkins, but Wolfman has never appealed to me. But a werewolf, just a giant hulking monster, just a beast and ferocious, has always been super cool to me. And the design of the werewolf in this movie is and always will be probably my favorite werewolf design. It's more wolf than man, but it's legitimately terrifying. It is one of the scariest looking monsters I think you'll ever see. I actually have the Kessler werewolf. I have a figure of him in my theater room, and not only the look of the werewolf, but the sound, the howl that the werewolf makes. Mm-hmm. It's my second, I told Ethan this earlier, it's my second favorite monster sound in a film. First being, of course, the Godzilla roar.
Godzilla,
yeah,
right.
But the Kessler werewolf, that howl, it's terrifying. The first time I heard that as a kid, it literally scared me. I was always afraid I'd be walking outside and I would hear that noise, because it is absolutely horrifying, that sound there.
If there's something I would not even remotely attempt to critique about this movie, it is the werewolf in and of itself. It is, like you said, the sound design. It's the appearance. Pretty much at any given time that it's shown. There's one brief shot in the Piccadilly Circus chase down where you can almost see on the back end like that it's on wheels.
Yeah.
There's a split second, and that's really not the design. That's more of a cinematography issue.
Right.
But I mean, obviously we're going to talk about it at length at some point in time with the transformation sequence. Yeah. I mean, basically everything regarding the werewolf in and of itself is absolutely incredible. And it does blow my mind. Sarah actually mentioned this because we're now not entirely certain that she had ever seen this movie until tonight. For some reason, we were under the impression we both had seen it, but she didn't remember anything about it. But I distinctly remember her going, okay, so this is the movie, right? Like at the end of the transformation, she's like, this is why this movie is what it is. I'm like, yep, that's it. I mean, at the end of the day, if nothing else appeals to you, you can't watch that sequence and go, well, that's bad.
Right.
Nope. 1981.
All practical effects. It's not
practical
a CG
effects.
And all right, so I don't. We'll talk about this later in the epilogues part because we do talk about what happens after the movie. But I do want to just take this quick moment to compare this film to its sort of sequel, An American Werewolf in Paris. Which, what's sad is a lot of people I know that know the American Werewolf movies know Paris and don't know London. And the CG werewolves in that film were terrible. That movie is terrible. Almost on every level, that movie is terrible. It's a rehash in a way of this film, just dumber, and I guess for the MTV generation, this is during the 80s when I think is the best. You know, we talked about what the 90s are the best decade for movies, according to that list. But
99 is the best year overall.
That's what I mean. Yeah. But I think the 80s is the best decade for horror films. It's just nothing but gold coming out of the 80s. You know.
I think if you had to stack them up, while 99 might be the most stacked year individually, I think it's hard to act like the 80s are not basically the best decade for movies, just for movies in general, but like you said, horror especially, yes.
It was the golden era. It's not the golden era of horror, because I think technically the golden era would be, the Universal monsters and Dracula and Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney, those kind of guys.
Oh man, but is any of that horror? I mean, at a certain point, all of that stuff was just movies. Like, you didn't even really have genres back then. You look at the 80s and you talk about, I hesitate to call John Landis an auteur, but movies like this that have some real, directorial structure and integrity and all of that, you talk about, it's the advent and the birth of the slasher. So Halloween gets claimed by the 70s, but everything after that, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, all the copycats, all the other stuff that comes after that. Scream only happens in the 90s because the 80s exists.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Before we get off on too much here, I do want to mention this. I've asked people this a million times that have watched the film, and no one ever sees what I see, but I want to know if you saw what I saw. So the head doctor in the hospital, is it just me, or does he look like an older Daniel Craig?
Yeah, I can see that.
It looks like Daniel Craig went back in time as an older gentleman and decided to pick up acting again, and he started
in this film.
I can't not see it. Every time I watch the movie, I can't not see it.
Well, I think he has a very similar cadence to his voice, even if they don't have the exact same sort of pitch. They follow the same kind of rhythm and speaking pattern. So I think that adds to that.
And it's in the eyes too. There's something about the eyes, but. Even if you don't like the horror aspect of this film, it is a comedy as well, and there are some genuinely funny moments in this film. The rapport between David and Jack, and their whole story together. It's very easy to kind of write Jack off once he's killed. Spoiler alert, of course, at the beginning of the film. But their interactions at the beginning, you show a real sign of friendship. Like it felt genuine to me. And then when he died, you could tell that they didn't treat Jack as an afterthought. He was a continued character throughout the thing, not just that he kept showing up and trying to convince David to kill himself, which, by the way, shows up, and every time he shows up he looks worse than he did before. And I love that, the constant rotting of Jack in the film. Absolutely. And he still plays it for comedic value. But the way the characters talk about each other, I mean, there's depth to this. The hard part about horror films, especially nowadays, is generally what they do is they take a group of either unlikable or forgettable characters, see most Friday the 13th films, and they throw them in a situation where they all get slaughtered, and you're happy to see them get killed. That's the movie. Horror movies like this, though, they take time to develop the characters and make you care about them, and then in the end, which we'll talk about here a little bit, it's an emotional gut punch. I could literally go on about this film for the next 40 minutes and never get you a word in. So I'm going to step back for a second and get your thoughts on the movie before we, dive deeper.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe we should just keep doing what you're doing.
Oh, did you not like it?
No, so that it's not that I didn't like it, but I can almost give away my rating for this. So we literally just watched it, and I know the last time that I saw this movie was sometime in college. So it has been approximately 20 years since I've seen this movie. I did like parts of it. I definitely like some aspects of it. Again, I was going to say the CGI because that's just my go-to for special effects. The special effects, the transformation, the werewolf in general, as I said earlier, is top notch. Doesn't get any better than that. It's literally as good as it gets. I think most of the movie is paced really well. I like the flow of the action. I do think there are definitely some times where Landis really loves a long shot, man, and I think he sometimes spends a little too long on things that didn't need it. The super extended sequence of David in Alex's apartment before the transformation, I distinctly remember about the fourth time he paced back and forth in the living room, I went, okay, what are we doing? Like, let's keep it moving.
I think we look at that in different ways because I've seen the movie a million times. It's like Ghostbusters for me. And knowing what's coming, the buildup of the dread, because if you've never seen the film before, I think it can come across as boring because you don't know what's about to happen. But knowing what's literally about to happen the next moment, it's almost like that calm before the storm. And I think that's on purpose. But I get what you're saying, absolutely. There are shots in this film that I didn't think were necessary. I mean, it's not a perfect film. No film is perfect. That would be a mistake to call any movie perfect. Even Ghostbusters, we've talked about. It's our favorite film, but it's not perfect. The extended sequences where David is running through the forest when he attacks the deer, I get he's supposed to be, going through some things mentally and all that, but I always thought those scenes were kind of unnecessary. They didn't really advance anything. They didn't really...
Right.
And then, oh, Jesus Christ, the werewolf monster, or the Nazi monsters that kill his family... it's just weird. It's just weird for the sake of being weird.
So I looked up something about that because I straight up forgot that any of that happened. And so that was the part where, of course, this is before the actual werewolf transformation, which Sarah was into. When the Nazi thing happened, she looked at me and goes, I'm sorry, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah,
what is happening? She
so
didn't
weird.
even notice that they were Nazis. Like, she was like, wait, they were Nazis? That was the thing?
Yeah.
So I looked up an explanation that someone had tried to give because I was like, I want to hear what other people are saying about this. And there was this long description about how, David Kessler, the character anyway, is Jewish. He is meant to be Jewish. It's very much explicitly said that he is Jewish. And so he's kind of going through this. This movie comes out in 1981, which means we're just 40 years or so removed, not even quite in some cases, from the Nazi regime. This is a Jewish person who is now in a part of the world that is the seat of where a lot of this stuff happened. He's having a fever dream, right? He's coming out of a traumatic incident. And so he has this kind of moment of just like imagining that happening. Now, that's great. And that's some good symbolism if that's what it is. Why the fuck did any of it need to happen in this movie?
It didn't.
What does it add to this movie? What does it do for it? Like
the weirdest part about it too, to me, is that they sell those Nazi monsters as like figures to purchase and put up there of all the things.
That's
like
weird.
It's very weird. The only reson I liked it was just for the weirdness of it. Like I'll
well, sure.
I'd be lying.
Yeah, it's a great scene in a bubble.
Yeah,
like
you got the Muppets playing on TV for some reason,
right? Which is the whole reason that Kermit and Miss Piggy get credited as him and herself in the credits of the movie.
But I also loved, because I'd never seen the dude before, I loved Frank Oz in this movie. Very brief role as the American kind of embassy guy. And I always tell people, I'm like, that's Frank Oz. They're like, no, it's not. I'm like, listen to the voice.
That's Yoda.
If you don't hear it in the voice,
that's
come on. It's strange to see him in an actual role, and then to have the Muppets on TV during that scene was very, very strange. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll let you continue. I'm going to interrupt you every time.
No, it's okay. It's
this isn't going to be like Kaz in the Matrix. I'm not going to try to convince you you're wrong. But
no, and again, the thing is, it's not even that I didn't like the movie. There are parts that I like, there are parts that I dislike. I feel like you were talking about character development and really making me care about those characters. I can see some of that, and I agree with some of it, but at the same time, there were definitely things that I thought, oh, that really could have used a lot more attention or explanation. I mean, you tell me you take out the weird Nazi dream sequence and give me a little more reason to feel this nurse and this character falling in love with each other, and then maybe I could get down on that a little more. I distinctly remember watching that whole relationship develop and going, you sure about that?
What I got
you sure about that?
What I got from that, not to go all Kaz on you, but from what I got from that, he was in there for, I think they said, a couple of weeks. It wasn't just
3 weeks.
Yeah, 3 weeks.
It was 3 weeks.
And she, in her explanation to him, her very awkward explanation, telling him, I've only had 7 lovers, 3 of which were one night stands. To me, she very much strikes as a very in the moment kind of person, and taking care of this guy for 3 weeks. And he is a handsome guy, and he was charming, unlike a lot of horror film kind of protagonists that come across as kind of, a dick or annoying or obnoxious. David Kessler is not those things. He's a very
I agree with that.
He's a likable character, and that's one thing again I like about this film is there are no unlikable characters. There is no one in this film that makes you go, God, I wish they wouldn't show up, because they irritate the shit out of me.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with that.
So I could see her. I don't know about true love, but I could see the attraction. I could see it being a thing.
I think I just would have liked. I would have liked a little more attention paid to if the heart of the movie is this guy and this girl are in love, or at least they're trying to figure it out, and that's what's going to be, the defining moment of the end of this movie. I needed to believe it more, and I didn't. It's fine for you to tell me that this relationship was, over the course of 3 weeks, he was unconscious, and then we see it develop. But I don't see that. I see her come into the room. I see her come back again into the room later and do the little feed sequences, like a little meet cute thing. That's fun. Right. But then afterward, to me, there was very little, if anything, maybe a little lip service paid to why he doesn't just go home, like why he stays in London with her. That seemed awkward. When he comes home in the morning from the zoo a little bit later and immediately just kind of dives onto her, and she's got the doctor in her ear on the phone going like, this is bad, you need to get him here. Is he okay? Yeah, I think he's fine. He's trying to currently hit on me and get me to have sex with him, but I think he's fine, even though he was gone all night.
And the fact that anyone that could wake up in the zoo naked and they don't make a bigger deal out of that. He didn't. It was such a non-moment. He just wakes up naked. He makes a joke. There's a very funny part where he steals balloons from a little kid.
Yeah, I was gonna say it leads to one of the best lines of the movie, which is, "A naked American man stole my balloons, mommy."
What?
And her just, what? That's great. And it's a fun little sequence, but it would have been much more fun had he. Like, this is weird to say, but it would have been more fun had he not had someone to go home to. Had he had to try to figure this thing out on his own, and had there been more of his interactions with Jack, and that would have been a great place, honestly, for Jack to show up and go,
I told you.
Okay, do you believe me now? I fucking told you. I don't know. The relationship to me felt very forced. There wasn't enough development of those characters for that. Of that relationship, not necessarily of the characters, but of that relationship. And that brought the whole thing down for me a little bit. By the way, just to sum things up, we were talking about the Metacritic score, and you said it surprised you. So I went and looked. I don't often go look at specific sites for this, but I was curious about one, and sure enough, it matches up almost exactly with a lot of the stuff that I'm saying. Roger Ebert, who is one of our, mine and yours, both personal heroes in this kind of business.
Yeah.
The Chicago Sun-Times, you cannot see his full review on the website for the paper anymore, but he gave it a 50, right down the middle. And the pull quote they have from that says, "Seems curiously unfinished, as if director John Landis spent all his energy on spectacular set pieces and then didn't want to bother with things like transitions, character development, or an ending."
No, see, I disagree with that. I love the ending. And I think the ending plays into what I was going to say about their relationship, because one of the things he says early on when he thinks he's a werewolf, and I love that they never treat it like he actually is a werewolf until he is one. Even the doctor, when he goes back to the small little village and he talks to the people at the slaughtered land.
He calls it mass hypnosis, or not mass hypnosis, mass neurosis, I think.
Yeah, it's a hysteria. If they believe that he's a werewolf, and then he believes he's a werewolf, he might hurt somebody. There's a they try to make it a little more realistic. But when he's going off and he's telling her about it, and he mentions the Wolfman with Lon Chaney, and he says that she mentions silver bullets, and he kind of laughs it off and says that he thinks only love can save somebody from that. And I think that ties directly into the ending, because when she says, "I love you," and you have it here in the notes, for a moment, he looks like he's recognizes her, but then he immediately charges at her to kill her. I don't know whether that's to mean that he didn't love her, and maybe it wasn't legit, or just that it's not true, love can't save you, and this is going to happen no matter what it is. I thought it was a fittingly bleak ending. If she would have somehow saved him in the end, I would have hated it. I think the fact that she says, "I love you," and he still tries to kill her, and they end up shooting him dead, I think that's a great ending. I don't know what he means by there's no ending there.
So okay, here's what my thought is on his take on that, and it also ties into my disappointment with the ending. I don't think you're wrong about any of what you just said. I think all of that is great. I think the problem, and I know we both, in a way, I kind of love it. The smash cut to the really fast paced version of Blue Moon that plays over the credits.
Yeah.
I kind of love it in a this is bad, but I love it sort of way, I guess, for lack of a better term. When he says that the movie doesn't seem to have an ending, all that stuff you just described is great. I don't think it's a proper ending, though. If I'm looking at it from a story structure perspective, the plot pyramid's got 5 sections to it, right? Exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. The climax happens in the movie. David gets shot. The resolution, everyone runs in to see that he has indeed, reverted back to being human. There's really no resolution. I'm sorry, that was the falling action. There really is no resolution. There is no finality like to that. And I don't need 20 more minutes of everyone wrapping up individual stories, but I feel like I do need something.
Well, see,
there.
To me, that is the finale. That is the finality of it. He's dead. He's dead, and that's it. Like, what else?
But it doesn't. It effectively then leaves out what, and it's what we're going to talk about. What happens to these characters after that? But like, you've quite literally just had. He could have stayed. He would have been good for this.
Yeah.
You've quite literally just had a werewolf go on a rampage in Piccadilly Circus. Now, I understand that there was never an intention, or I guess originally, to make a sequel to this, but you're leaving a big piece of the puzzle on the table there. Like, what happens in the wake of that? Does it get covered up in somehow? What happens to the other characters? Are they vindicated? Are they vilified? I would have loved to at least seen what happens to the people that he killed. They wanted him to die so they could move on. A second's worth of that would have been nice. It feels very abrupt to me. It feels like just bam, it's over.
But I think that's the point. Like, to me, I don't need a scene of Jack and David meeting in heaven and him saying, "Hey, thanks for dying, so I could go to heaven." I don't need any of that. He's dead, and that's the end of the story. But I agree with you. I do agree with you. I am curious to know what would happen afterwards. I'm curious to know, because all the werewolf attacks before that were straight up covered up by these villagers, and it always bothered me, because I always thought, why did they let them go out to the moors? Why did they let them leave? Why wouldn't they keep them there? Even if they had to lie to them or something, why wouldn't they keep them? Why would they protect this monster that's out there? And then, of course, I realized literally today, I've seen this movie a million times, and the thought dawned on me today, because this guy was probably one of their friends. He was probably one of them, and they were trying to cover it up, because they didn't want anything bad to happen to him. And then they
kill him.
And then they killed him because they got pushed to the point of no return, and they finally realized, we're there's a part where he says it's murder then, and he's like, murder it is. So I am curious to see what would happen in the wake of this, because there's no way you can cover this up. This was a straight up werewolf attacking people in front of everybody, and one of the all-time great I don't know what you would call it, carnage scenes. Cars are crashed into each other. Heads are falling off.
That scene's incredible. Yes.
So what do you say?
It sounds like a bit from Dumb and Dumber. Our pets' heads are falling off. It's a great scene. They made
that dumbass sequel, An American Werewolf in Paris, and they don't I think they do reference it in there somewhere, but like, part of the reason I never wanted them to make a sequel to it is because where do you take the story from there? And we'll talk about that later. You openly have to admit werewolves are real at that point, right? Like, you have to.
Right. There's no avoiding that. And I think that's what's bothersome about the way that it ends, is that it feels like this wouldn't have been the case at the time because you didn't have that kind of television at the time. But to me now, it feels like the ending. Well, this is kind of poignant. It feels like the ending to an episode of a Mike Flanagan series. That it smash cuts to that ending, and then the next episode is going to pick up where that left off and do something next.
And
again,
no pickup.
I don't. Right, there's no pickup. I don't need 20 minutes like a Lord of the Rings movie wrapping up everybody's individual story with a 5-second sequence of all the people. I just need. I would have even appreciated a cut back to Alex and her grief and the doctor and him like getting her out of there or something. Even just a little denouement, just something other than just he's laying there dead, smash cut to black credits, because there's
Well,
I don't know. To me, there is more to the story than that, and that's always going to bother me.
They did cut back to. I mean, literally, I think the last thing you see is her crying, and then it goes right into the whatever. And I
don't think so, man. I think it's him. I think it's him laying there shot. I might have to watch
again because I did not.
It's one of the two.
I didn't get to watch the ending, unfortunately, today. I cut off right at the part at the porno theater, but I think if they had done more, it wouldn't have been as memorable of an ending. This is a unique ending to me, and I like that. But I can see the criticism.
I'll give you that.
The abrupt ending. The last time I watched this before today, I watched it with somebody, and she had never seen it before. And when
we talked about this.
When that part happened, and they cut to that song, she just looks at me. And she goes, "Is that it?" And I think that sums up probably what a lot of people thought when they saw it. Is that it? But what else happens? I want more. But I think that's impactful. I think that leaves a more memorable moment and feeling than if they had dragged it out and done any kind of prologue. Not prologue.
Epilogue.
Yeah, thank you. The
like
name
in
of
the
fucking show.
I was wondering if it was going to kick in.
It did.
It's okay. All right.
One thing I loved about the film, and I hope you enjoyed as well, I really did like the humor. There are some parts in there that I thought were legitimately funny, and when they're in the bar and he's telling the story about the Alamo, and that story gets me every time.
I knew that joke, so I knew where it was going. I've heard that joke before, but I knew when it got started. I mean, the best part of the best comedic part for me for that is when they're all laughing and Jack just cuts through, hey, what's with that thing on the wall?
And they all just stop and stare at it. And he throws he misses the dart, and you made me miss.
It's that awkward sort of almost, it's approaching, I think you should leave level humor.
Right.
Just uncomfortable. Like I said, the kid in the zoo, I think that's a great line to just have. Anything that a British kid says so earnestly is always going to be funny.
And deadpan. Very deadpan.
And deadpan. That's how they deliver it. I will say, though, the humor is not all hits for me. The bumbling detective character does nothing for me. It feels very forced.
It was out of place, but I thought it was inoffensive. And when he knocks over the stuff in the room, when they were having the discussion,
the little kidney pans.
I thought that was kind of funny. But my favorite part,
it's fine.
I think the funniest scene in the movie, and it's such a weird spot. It's in the porno. He's in the porn theater. He's watching this porn. And this guy and this woman
the
are
guy
having
who comes
sex.
to the
He
door.
just walks in. He says something like, "I told you never to do this again." And he says, "I promise you no such thing." "Not you, her." And she says, "I've never seen you before in my life." And he just goes, "Oh, my mistake." And he just walks out.
Just
leaves.
Yeah, because they created that sequence specifically for the movie. It's credited in the credits as its own little mini movie.
That was so.
You can tell John Landis
funny.
just really wanted to shoehorn that stuff.
And
it's
so
don't get me wrong,
pointless. It's so.
It is funny. But I think that's what ends up bugging me as I'm watching shit like that. I'm watching the Nazi fever dream sequence, and I'm going, my God, if you cut all of this stuff, or at least cut it down a little bit, you've got another 5 to 10 minutes of movie. And a movie that is a really good runtime, 97 minutes, just over an hour and a half. Yeah. You cut that stuff, and instead of cutting it completely, you give me more development of these characters that you really want me to get into. Again, you give me maybe just a minute after David gets taken down of somebody saying something. Give me a good classic line at the end. And I think I would have been a little more on board with the story. Again, it's to use Ebert's word, it's the transitions. It's the get me from point A to point B instead of just here's where we are, this is what we're doing, now it's done. I would have loved that stuff more personally anyway.
I thought there was a very poignant scene when he goes into the telephone booth and calls back home.
Telephone booth.
And basically says his goodbyes. I thought that was a sweet. I don't know. I thought that was a sweet scene. I liked the David Kessler character. I liked all the characters of the movie. Like I said, there was nobody in this film I didn't like.
I put a note in there. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but so when he calls to talk to his family, he gets the younger sister on the phone, right? Rachel. He calls her Rachel. At one point in time, he says, be good to your brother Max, and he's gross. No, he's not gross. Be good to him. Don't fight with him. Rachel and Max, of course, John Landis's real life children. Yeah. Max Landis, and his older sister's name is Rachel. So. He stuck a little one in there, but yeah, that's a good sequence. I did enjoy that. Like you said, the David Naughton Kessler character is just he's a good protagonist in the sense that, like you said, you feel for him. He's a normal guy who gets caught up in a very unnormal situation.
Country. He's an American
in a foreign
London.
country, no less. Yeah, so that's no good in general. I got nothing bad to say about him overall as an actor, as a character. I think all of that was great in and of itself. Again, I would have loved more about his relationships with other people, but him himself, sure, got no problem there.
I would have loved more werewolf. That's my other complaint about the film. You only get one good. The scene in the subway when the businessman is running a
chases him
actual
down.
Businessman, by the way.
No way. A real businessman.
When you see the werewolf, and I told Ethan, I was like, watch the top of the screen, because you only see it for a few seconds, maybe like a second, but you see the werewolf kind of walk out, and then you don't see him again until much, much later. You get the big reveal when he attacks everybody. I hate that you have such a good werewolf and they barely used him, but I guess that makes it better because that makes it feel more special. Again, watch an American Werewolf in Paris, or don't, because there are werewolves all over that damn thing, and it's awful. Like, I can't stress to you how much I dislike that film. Maybe I need to watch it again and give it another chance, but if this movie is dripping with 80s humor and effects, then that one is dripping with 90s bad CG and forced humor and edgy comedy.
Well, again, the best thing to come out of that second movie is the Bush song "Mouth." That's on the soundtrack. That's it. That's the best thing.
They tried to put so much of this movie in that one. I forget her name. She was in Happy Gilmore. She was the love interest. I don't remember her name, but she's in that one as basically the Jack role. She's killed by the main character, who then says, "You need to die so I can move on." And I also don't remember there being much of a resolution with her, but she was a very unlikable character. There were a lot of very unlikable characters in that movie.
Julie Bowen, is that the actress?
Julie Bowen, and I like Julie Bowen. Julie Bowen's a good actress, but I just did not care for that movie as a whole. Again, why werewolf films are so hard to do, I don't understand. Why horror comedies are so hard to do, I don't understand. I think this one is fantastic. I think Shaun of the Dead is fantastic. Horror and comedy to me go very well together. And
you and I mean, my God, it's over my shoulder. We've talked about it a million times. Right. Ghostbusters, number one, right? Top of the crop. Yeah. And while it is decidedly more, if you want to get really technical, of a comedy horror movie, right? It's meant to be a comedy and it's got some horror elements and some action. Like you said, I think the reason those two become that peanut butter and jelly, and I'm sure we've talked about this before, but is because they're opposite sides of the same coin. People say that's comedy and drama. Well, kind of. But horror is a tension buildup that doesn't necessarily engage you emotionally. You can feel horror without feeling bad about your real life, right? Drama,
that's
in a
why
lot
I
of
love
ways.
It. Yeah.
Right. Drama pulls you into, not always real world situations, but the kind of things that make you emotional about shit that really could and often does happen to you. Whereas horror, most people are not going to experience most horror stuff in their life. Right. So you get that tension and that build up and that release that comes then from the comedy that goes with it. And like you said, it's peanut butter and jelly. So yeah, I agree. I wish more people would. I don't want to say I wish more people would attempt it, because as Asa would say, that feels like a monkey's paw situation. Oh, really? All right. We're going to make a million bad horror comedies every year.
Right.
But I wish more people would put time and effort into one. That's what I want.
There's also in this movie, I think there are real moments of dread. Again, the part where Jack is talking to David about, you're going to be a werewolf, you'll kill people, you need to kill yourself now. Yeah. And David says, I do not accept this. And the part where he tells him, don't cry, just all the build up to when he finally becomes a werewolf. There is a creeping dread of, you as the audience knows this is going to happen, and David does not. He does not think this is real. Right. And then once it happens, him trying to get himself arrested, him basically, he just basically ditches Alex completely at that point because he's trying to keep her away from him. Something terrible is going to happen. And then literally the worst thing happens. He turns into a werewolf in a fucking porno theater and then starts murdering people. By the way, the creepy guy that walks over to him in transformation and just sits there and stares at him as he's going like, get away from me. And the dude's just watching him like that hit too close to home. You put blinders in front of that guy. That's, ugh. Anyway, all right. Enough jibber jawing about the film. Let's get to the reviews here. Surprisingly, I am not going to give this 2 thumbs up. I am giving it a thumb up because it is my favorite horror film.
Really?
But to me, 2 thumbs up should be reserved for like the best of the best. Ghostbusters is 2 thumbs up. Phantom of the Opera, to me, is 2 thumbs up. An American Werewolf in London is a great movie. It's a solid horror film. I love it. Just because it's your favorite doesn't mean it's the best. But it is my all-time favorite horror film. It's funny. It's touching in moments. It's got the best werewolf ever put to cinema. And it's shocking to me that it's 43 years later or 42 years later, and we still
42.
have not made a werewolf film that can match up to it.
Well, can do it. Somebody's got to be able to do it. They just haven't either tried or succeeded, depending on which way you want to look at it.
Hunter, I'm really struggling to think of. I said I could name them on my hand in 5. American Werewolf in London, The Howling,
Paris. I mean, I guess technically you got to include Paris.
Oh no, I'm
there
saying
in terms
of good ones.
Good ones.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you just meant in general.
No. Howling, American Werewolf in London.
I mean, it's probably the reason you're thinking of this war is because you used to think Dog Soldiers was one, and now you know better.
Man. God, I really did. It was on my list, and now it's not.
Yeah.
I'm glad American Werewolf in London didn't go that way. What about you? What do you say? I think I know. I think I know. I'm going to give it in front.
I've kind of hinted at it the whole time, but I think this is the first time I've done this on this show, which is we're 13 episodes in. I don't know that I've ever done this. It is 1 up, 1 down for me. It's right square in the middle, basically for all the same reasons you mentioned. It being 1 for you, it's one of your favorites, but you recognize you recognize that it has its flaws.
Of course.
I'm in the same sort of boat. It's not really one of my favorites in the sense that I have only seen it honestly a few times at the end of the day. And, having seen it for the first time in 20 something years, I liked it. I didn't love it. I thought there were some really great things. I thought there were some things I really didn't get into, and it could have spent more time doing some stuff. It could have spent less time doing some other things. So yeah, to me, it's right down the middle. It's definitely worth a watch. I think if you are a dedicated horror fan, and if you grew up in the 80s, or if you like that kind of movie, you're gonna lean more toward the up. If that's not your kind of thing, if you're not into stuff that's like a little awkward and a little off kilter and has its flaws and shows them, you're gonna be a little further down there. For me,
it's quirky.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't want to say tolerate, because that makes it sound like I'm just dealing with it. I can appreciate some level of quirkiness and kind of offbeatness, and sometimes it gets a little too much for me. So that's why it puts it right in the middle for me, for sure.
In terms of the epilogue, I know this is going to be a short episode because I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't want there to be a sequel. I don't want anything to continue on after this. To me, this is one of those stories that I think should be a one and done. And to me, it's not perfect, but it's perfect as it is. Like I know all the complaints, and I think you have some valid points, but I wouldn't change anything about this film other than, well, no, that's not true. Admittedly, some of the scenes that they went on with that I thought I agree with you, they were pointless. Other than for the fact that they were weird. That's all. The only reason they were there, to show that he's having this mental decline and that he's having this crazy fever dream, but without any real explanation about why. It's specifically that, like, why is he chasing a deer in the woods and eating it? I'm guessing because that's a very bestial thing to do. I get that, but it seemed unnecessary. I feel like they really put across how bestial he was when he was eating people.
Yeah.
When he was chewing on people.
That pretty well sums that up, right?
Yeah.
I don't really need to see the build up to that. I do. I remember as the first part of that sequence was going on, though, I do appreciate that they had to have had a trained deer on set, right? And I guess he was told, hey, just hug him around the neck and just kind of move around with him. Because the first part, you just kind of see that, and you can see the back end of the deer, like, what the fuck are we doing? and then he comes up and he's got, like, the fake one, and he's like, all right, blood all over him. But before that, I like to imagine that he's just like, all right, just grab the deer around the neck, just kind of give him a little wiggle.
Right.
And then they're like, all right, that's a wrap on the deer. Take him away.
I have another complaint, actually. I just thought of.
Yes.
The ferocity that you see Jack get killed in the beginning. Because, again, the dread of when they're walking on the moors, when the realization hits them and they look at each other and they recite what the guys just told them. Stay off the moors, beware the moon. They realize they fucked up. When the werewolf attacks Jack, and it's out of nowhere, too. It's one of the great, like, not a jump scare, but it's just out of nowhere. The werewolf just grabs him and attacks him.
it's 81, so nobody was doing that thing yet where it's like somebody's on the ground and they're like, oh man, help me up, and then the attack comes, like the second beat.
Yeah.
Everyone does it now. Nobody was doing it then.
But the way the werewolf attacks him, and you see little glimpses of the wolf, and you see him just getting slaughtered and torn apart. They don't show anyone else really getting killed until the very end. I feel like you could have shown like these people getting killed. You could have shown what the werewolf did to them. But that's just me as a gore hound. That's just me as someone in horror films. I like to see the blood and guts a little bit when it's done correctly. And this is a fucking, probably 300-pound monster wolf attacking people.
Right.
They should be torn to shreds,
I think it's fair to ask for more gore when what's really scary. Oh, okay, that's not entirely true, but bear with me here. What's really scary about werewolves and lycanthropes in general is two things. Number one, the dread that it's the zombie dread. You could become one too, right? So that's vampires, werewolves, zombies. The fact that you might not, even if you survive them, you might become them, and is that worse, and et cetera, et cetera. That's the existential dread. The other one is, like you said, it's a 300-pound fucking werewolf with claws and teeth.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to want gore when the scary thing about them is, oh god, they're going to turn me into a pile of gore.
Yeah, they're monsters. It's like a giant bear attacking you. It's just this ferocious death. Okay, if I have to do the epilogue thing, I will say, the only way I would have liked to have an epilogue to this is if they just went balls to the wall with it, crazy kind of in a way, and take the Alex character, have her and the doctor, or maybe just her, try to trace back this wolf's lineage. Because, they showed that the last person that... Because I refuse to believe this is the only werewolf in the world. As you saw in American Werewolf in Paris, it's not. Right. But if they could go back and try to figure out where it all started, find out who got the guy that got David, and, maybe try to get revenge against him, and maybe it's like more of an action werewolf film, I would have liked that, because I love Ginny Gutter. I love her. I think she's fantastic. Not just in this movie, but I like her in her other films. Again, crush the crush button. I had a huge crush on her growing up. I would love to see her in more stuff. So her and the doctor teaming up to like fight these werewolves, like legitimately turn her into a badass and have her fighting werewolves and shit. It's weird and it's stupid and it does not fit the pace of this movie at all, but why not? Let's do it.
You're gonna hate me for it, and maybe I don't know, because you're kind of pitching a similar vein as I am, but I don't think. I think the epilogue to this story, to use your word, is a prologue. I think it's a prequel. Really? I think instead of following this up with the existing characters, I think instead of following this movie with the existing characters, I'll acquiesce to you that I don't. Other than what you just mentioned, I don't know that there is a way to follow it up that's interesting and worth it. Other than that, so we go back. I want to see the history of this tavern. I want to see why it is that they're kind of like they feel like they're charged with protecting, if this area, if not the world, from lycanthropes and from werewolves. I want to see how the guy in the beginning becomes one. Like, what's his story? The build up to that. I think that's the continuation of the story. And I know that's kind of a cop out because it's not really an epilogue. It's what is the sequel rather than what happens to these characters.
That would be interesting. It's interesting. The prologue.
I think. I think that's what. To be fair, had this movie, it makes that totally different. Had this movie been made today, but when we get a sequel like American Werewolf in Paris, in the 90s from this movie in the 80s, had you made this movie today, the sequel would have been a prequel, right? They would not have bothered to try to make another one. They would have absolutely made a prequel. It would not have even been a question. They would have gone back and gone, let's talk about what happened to create this whole thing. And to me, that's the only interesting story there that's really left to be told.
Ginger Snaps.
That's just me. Oh shit, that is a werewolf thing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Oh my god.
Is it? I remember it being good.
I was gonna say I've seen it once. I know I've seen it once in college. Again, Blockbuster was very kind to me from the years of 2003 to 2007.
Is Catherine Isabel and Emily? Oh, what was her last name?
I'm never going to remember these because it has been a very, very long time.
Did you watch all three of them?
No, first one. That's it.
So,
and I know the sequel, which has a great name, Ginger Snaps Back, is called that, and that's all I got.
Well, here's the question though: why is it called Ginger Snaps Back when Ginger's dead? Literally, like the sequel is about the sister.
Because snapback is a slang term for a comeback.
Anyway,
that's what it is.
There was also
That thing.
The reason I mention it is because the third Ginger Snap movie, I believe, was called The Beginning, and it is a prequel. It is a prequel to the first movie, but it actually it takes place in I think the 1800s. I want to say, where there's this fort out in the middle of nowhere besieged by werewolves, and there's this horrible snowstorm, and these two girls randomly show up, and it's the same two women from Ginger Snaps. It's Catherine Isabel and Emily whatever, and they show up, and one of them has been bitten by one of them, and they don't reveal this. And as they're in the fort, they realize that these guys are cut off from the rest of the world, basically, because no one knows they're out there, and they're fighting against these monsters. It's a pretty good film. It's not bad, actually, but it's very modern, the way they speak and stuff. Like, Ginger and her sister both speak very, like, they don't fit the time period. But anyway.
Yeah, they're anachronistic, is what you're saying. We haven't mentioned it yet, and I think it's got to be said because we've made the joke a couple of times, and it's not much of a joke, frankly. I think I'm dead fucking serious nowadays about this. If you're not going to make a bunch of good werewolf movies, or if nobody's going to try, I'll throw you a free pitch and somebody do it. Werewolves on the fucking moon, or werewolves in space. How does that affect the lycanthropy? Does it make a difference if you're around the moon all the time, or is it all werewolf all the time? At that point, are you just a wolf? How does this work? I need to know.
Go back, listen to last year's All Hallows Eve, or Tales from Tales. Say the name of the show.
Hallows Eve Tales.
Thank you. One of the stories that I wrote was about and I really want to turn this into something more, but about a girl who thinks a werewolf murdered her family, so she ends up tracking him down and torturing him, waiting for him to turn into a werewolf. I think that'd be a good werewolf movie, but I'm biased.
Absolutely.
Now, to close out the last episode of Extras and Epilogues for Halloween, since we are talking about werewolves, I do have a list, and I want to mention it real quick. We're going back to IGN, baby, because they do the worst list possible.
They check and recheck the facts.
In my head, I was thinking to myself, like, okay, I named The Howling and American Werewolf in London. What other good werewolf movies are there? Ginger Snaps is one of them. And I think The Wolfman with Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins, I think that's a good movie. It's not great, but it's good. Well, let's see what IGN thinks are the best werewolf films of all time.
Oh, shit.
I don't think this is in a particular order, but 1941's The Wolfman. I mean, you kind of have to throw that on there because it's a classic.
Sure.
You know, it's one of the originals. It's one of the Universal films, obviously. The Curse of the Werewolf, 1961. I've never heard of it, but apparently it's a Hammer film. I have not, admittedly, I've not seen a lot of Hammer films, but I heard they're great.
No, me either.
Silver Bullet, 1985. I do like this movie. Have you ever seen
it? Man, I feel like if I started watching it, I could tell you for certain. I know the movie, and I'm going now to look who's in it because I know I've heard of it.
Boy in the Wheelchair.
Whether or not I've actually watched it, I don't know. Yeah, see, I'm pretty sure I haven't seen this.
So but
I know of it.
It's a Stephen King story, obviously.
Right.
And it's got Gary Busey as Gary Busey.
Of course.
And it's about a boy in a wheelchair and his older sister, and in one summer, a werewolf starts killing people, and it's kind of showing what this town deals with all these deaths, and parts of it are incredibly hokey. It has probably the worst werewolf costume of all time. It's bad. It looks like someone went to Party City and got a bear costume. It's so bad. But the story itself is really good, and it's got a lot of heart to it. There's some really sad scenes. One guy gets his son torn apart, and at the funeral, he's talking to, he's yelling at the sheriff because he hasn't done anything, and he mentions how his son was found torn to pieces. It's really good. It also has one of my favorite lines in all of werewolf films, and I've said this before jokingly. It's when he's talking about his sister. She's out there. She's the narrator for the film, but she's over there like kind of prancing around for this guy she has a crush on, and it's Corey Haim, by the way, one of the Coreys, as the younger brother.
Oh shit!
He says something like she's over there, showing her tits off like no one's ever had tits before. It's such a stupid fucking line.
Is that what that comes from?
That's what it's from. Yeah.
Oh my god, that's pretty great. I like that.
2002's Dog Soldiers.
It sure is. Oh shit! I just thought about something. Is Underworld on this list? Aren't there some vampires in there?
Vampires and
werewolves. Is that all
No, it's vampires.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. I was going to say, I meant to say, aren't there some werewolves in there? But not just vampires.
That's the story. Is there was the werewolf versus the vampires. That was their eternal war.
By the way, Twilight took that and fucked it all up for everybody.
I don't like those movies, for the record. I've never been a fan. It's an action movie. There's no horror to it. It's an action movie. Most
They're
people,
fine.
they watched it for Kate Beckinsale and Skin Tight Leather, and she really, to be fair to her, she really like started a trend there because the whole black leather vampire thing took the fuck off after that. 2000's Ginger Snaps, we mentioned that. That is a good one. And I think it's Emily Perkins. Is it Emily Perkins? It is Emily Perkins. Okay, I was correct.
I'm going to have to take your word on that one. That sounds right, but...
1984 is The Company of Wolves. I have seen this movie once or twice. I couldn't tell you much about it. It's, I know Angela Lansbury's in it, and there's a weird scene where they all transform at like a dinner table, and there's a story about Little Red Riding Hood, and it's kind of like a symbolism for a young girl being taken advantage of by a man.
Okay, I gotcha.
I feel like I need to watch that again. The Wolf of Snow Hollow. So disappointed in this film. I saw this about a year or two ago. It's this really, really cool story about a cop who's kind of at his fucking edge, and all of a sudden his town is besieged, I use that term again, by a werewolf who's killing people off left and right. Here's the disappointment in it. Spoiler alert. It's not a werewolf. It's just a big guy who's hairy that's murdering people. That was my disappointment. I fucking hated that. Werewolves Within, 2021, based on the Ubisoft game, Tanner. I know you're listening.
I forgot about that. That's what's his name? He's on I Think You Should Leave.
Sam Richardson. Yeah.
Sam Richardson, thank you. Wow, I couldn't think about it.
I couldn't
think of it.
I like this film. This is a good horror comedy. It's also got the girl from the phone commercials. I can't pronounce her name. Milana Vaintrub.
It's like Ventrib, something like that. I know who you're talking about. I remember this coming out, wanted to see it, passed by me, completely forgot it was a thing. I need to go catch up on that.
Yeah, I won't say any spoilers then, but Sam Richardson, this is the first thing I saw him in, and he's fantastic. Yeah. The movie's pretty good.
Yep.
Late Phases. This is a really good one, too. I don't know if you've ever heard of this one. It's about a blind veteran who lives in like a retirement home, and a werewolf is attacking people, and he has to stop it. And he's, like I said, he's blind, and he's an older man, and he's a veteran. It's also got the worst werewolf you've ever seen, but the story's good. 1994 Wolf with Jack Nicholson. Sure.
Oh shit! I forgot about that movie completely.
Yeah, but that's a Wolfman. That's a Wolfman to me. I don't fuck with Wolfman. James Spader's
that's like Werewolf by Night. Is that? That's more of a Wolfman than an actual werewolf. I think.
I was so disappointed in that. I'm gonna be honest with you.
I liked it quite a bit, but it's not something I've thought much about since then. I enjoyed it in the moment, and I remember afterward thinking, like, you will never watch this again. It was fun, but you'll never watch it again.
I liked that they brought the Bloodstone character into it, because I think she's a cool character. But it was a one and done, for sure. 1985's Teen Wolf. Sure.
Okay, first of all, that is absolutely a wolfman, not a werewolf.
Right.
Secondly, on the other hand, though, that's a pretty great movie. I mean, honestly.
But it's not.
It's fun.
It's not a scary movie, obviously. It's fucking goofy. The Wolfman.
And barely a werewolf movie.
He slam dunks. 2007's Trick or Treat.
I'm sorry. We have to go back to it because I remember them talking about this on Pod Meets World, and I think it's a worthy thing for us to bring up. Why does being a wolf make him better at basketball? I don't. What is the analogy? What is the comparison?
When he throws the glasses on and he's dancing on the car and stuff, all because he became a werewolf.
Because he's a werewolf now.
Fuck out of here.
Sure.
Oh.
Trick or Treat. I don't remember the werewolf in Trick or Treat. It's been a long ass time since I've seen this movie.
So it's one of the segments. It's Anna Paquin. It's her and her friends, and they're dressing her up in a sexy outfit, and she's all nervous about it. It turns out because they're all werewolves, and they tear off their skin and they eat people. It's a good movie. It's a great movie. It's one of the best anthology films. 1981's Wolfen. I've actually never seen this movie. I've never seen it.
Nope. So wait a minute. This came out in 1981. That's the same year that American Werewolf in London came out, and The Howling.
So that's three of the best.
What was with the werewolf movies that year? Holy shit!
Speaking of 1981's The Howling, next on the list.
There you go.
That's good. Skip all the sequels.
Oh, I'm certain.
And finally,
no part of me is surprised.
An American Werewolf in London, considered by many horror fans to be the best werewolf movie ever made. Yes. Even if you don't like the film as much as I did, it's
even
definitely the
split
best
decision
werewolf
on me.
movie that's ever
Right,
been made.
right. I'm not. If all we're talking about is strictly werewolf movies, it's 2 thumbs up, no question about it.
Special effects in that movie, I don't know if you knew, but it was done by Rick Baker.
Baker, same guy who did Thriller for Michael Jackson.
Yeah, and the same guy that did,
Yep.
if I remember correctly, I'm looking because I might be crazy, Men in Black, Wild
sounds
Wild
right.
West, Gremlins.
Yep.
I thought he did Jurassic Park, but I think I was wrong about that.
No, I don't think Baker had anything to do with him. Jurassic Park was, Phil Tippett was the guy on set, if I remember correctly. And the main reason I remember that is because the meme that came out of it, because in the credits, he's credited as dinosaur supervisor. And the credit was, you had one job, Phil. There were raptors all up in the fucking kitchen. In the fucking kitchen, Phil.
Rick
That's
Baker.
good. We gotta talk about that movie sometime too.
And Tom Savini, the best makeup people ever in history.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, let's we can ramble on forever, but let's cut it off there. So that's going to be the end of our Halloween episodes of Extras and Epilogues.
Yeah.
Of course, that doesn't mean that we're not going to cover horror films in the future. Of course we will.
No.
But we will be back to, next month we start Nostalgic November. And
That's right. So we were just talking about this last night.
You had a great idea for this, yeah.
The plan is over the course of November, we have 5 Wednesdays in November, and over the course of the month, we want to bring on some of our favorite guests and talk about their most nostalgic movies, the movies that they remember from their childhood that were formative for them, that were big for them in some way. Maybe not, childhood necessarily, but again, formative for them in some way as moviegoers or something that they really love now. So,
can I go ahead and spoil what the first one's going to be? I'll tell you right now.
Yeah, because it's Lindsay, right?
It's Lindsay we always associate Tanner with October and Terrifying Tanner Thursdays and stuff.
Right.
October's kind of Tanner's month. Well, November is definitely Lindsay's month. She's all nostalgic, and I'll tell you what it is. I have not spoken to her, but I'll ask her if she wants to do it and ask her what movie it's going to be. I'll tell you right now, it's The Last Unicorn. Watch.
I was literally thinking The Last Unicorn. I knew it was going to come up. Now, importantly, I've never seen it, and I've made it very clear that one of the reasons I love doing this show is because there are a lot of movies that I like. Subconsciously, I go, "Yeah, you've seen that. Of course, you've seen that. You've seen 100 different things on the internet about it, and you've talked about it, and sure, you've seen it." And then you realize, no, I haven't fucking seen this movie. I've never actually sat down and watched it. I love to just experience a new movie for the first time. I am not somebody who likes rewatching more than. There's like maybe 10 movies that I rewatch on a regular basis, and that's it.
Same. I can say what they are.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, one day we will do that list, and it'll be very easy for the both of us.
I think they're very similar, yeah.
Yes. But that's one of the things I love about the show is, all I need is a reason. If this is my reason to sit down and watch a new movie, I'm down for it. If that means it's The Last Unicorn, and that's what I'm watching next Wednesday, then let's do it. I'm here for it.
It's not one of my favorites. Not because I think it's bad. It's just, man.
It's just not your thing.
It's not my style. Yeah, it's not my style.
Yeah.
But I'll rewatch it with her, and we'll tackle that next week. So I'm gonna call it right now. Next week, next Extras and Epilogues, The Last Unicorn with Lindsay Wolfgong, the last Wolfgong, as we start up Nostalgic November. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you go back and check out this week's episodes of great stories. Hunter, of course, on Monday we had the penultimate episode of Hallows' Eve Tales Season 2 Tabula Rasa.
Oh, but we sure did. It's my episode, my specific one. I worked with Tanner on the season premiere like I did last year, but this was my fully one and done, completely from me episode. Shannon and Cody and Jesse really helped me bring it to life, and I appreciate you guys a lot for that because, again, I've said it a couple times since then. I think if it's not my favorite thing, it's definitely one of my favorite things that I've ever written. And we have one episode left to go. The season finale from Shannon is coming up this coming Monday.
Cosmic horror, baby. This one's going to be a bloody one. Let's real quick give it up for Jesse for that Russian accent that he did.
Oh, hell yeah.
Episode. I appreciate that. Also, I just realized, Tanner, we no longer have the boost. We cannot use "Oh my God" is gone.
We can only use a couple of things. Yeah, there's only 8 of them, and I don't know how it decided that it was those, but yeah, oh my God, it has to come back.
Oh,
I need that to be one of them.
Very sad.
I pulled up the board, and it was like...
Also, the penultimate episode of Candela Obscura went up
Yes,
today.
Candela Obscura, we are approaching the end of that. And I know, importantly, if you've been listening, it doesn't sound like it, but just bear with me, because I promise you that we are. So that last episode will air. That's our Halloween Day show next week.
Right.
Importantly, it will not be happening that night. We'll be recording it in advance.
Right.
So you'll get it sometime during the day on Halloween. That way you can enjoy it Halloween night and everything we've done up to that point. But yeah, we had last night's episode. I'm running a couple of concurrent games for you guys and some other groups and stuff right now. So sometimes it's hard for me to keep track of what's going on, but I got to tell you, this is one of my favorite times of me and my life playing tabletop games. And I'm not even actively playing anything right now. I'm running them all.
Right.
But they're all going very, very well, and it's a ton of fun. It's a brand new system. Again, it's gothic horror. It is steampunk horror. Go check it out. I don't even want to spoil it. Just go check it out.
And tomorrow is the last episode of Terrifying Tanner Thursday, as again we shift into Nostalgic November next month. And really, I don't know if I'll get a chance to say it again, but I'll say it now. I think we killed it this October. It was, I think, the best month of shows we've ever had in the history of the podcast, because it was so different and unique. Every show, we always talk about we're going to do Halloween themed stuff, and then we usually hit the mark, but sometimes we don't. I think this month, top to bottom, it was a hit. So I'm very proud of us in that, and I'm excited about Nostalgia November. Until then, though, my friends, ladies and gentlemen, the balcony is closed. Thank you. We will see you tomorrow for Terrifying Tanner Thursday, and I really need to work on an outro or just end it there. So next time I'll get better.
I was, if you threw it to me, I was just going to go, those sheep shit on my pack.
If it was me, right then I was just gonna.
Dang 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 ding dong ding blue moon moon blue moon dip 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 moon moon blue moon dip 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 moon moon blue moon dip 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 bomb 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 dang 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 ding dong ding blue moon. You saw me standing